to Delmarvalous Festival.
The Farming on the Shore, family business narrative stage at the Delmarvalous Festival. I'm Jackson Medell. I'm the curator and folklorist here at the Ward Museum. So we're here with Jay Martin and Aaron Cooper. They are two local farmers. And we're just here to sort of talk about farming on the shore. So I have a few questions that are prepared, and we'll prompt these guys to talk a bit, and then we'll open it up to questions and hear what they have to say. So first, Jay, if you could just tell us a bit about your history in farming on the shore. I believe both of you sort of have a family background here in farming and that kind of thing. But could you just tell us a little bit about your personal history?
All right. Well, I don't actually have a family background here.
Oh, okay.
My wife and I moved here in 1980 with our son. And then in 1985, we had an opportunity to buy a greenhouse operation from a retiring farmer neighbor who became our mentor, he and his wife both. At the time, he was growing transplants for local vegetable growers in the area. And so we took that over, and he mentored us through that process, and the growers, or the farmers that we were growing for, stuck with us. And then in 1991, well, we bought it in 85, and by 88 I had made the transformation to organic growing. And then in 91, the Maryland Department of Ag started an organic certification program, and we became part of that. We were certified as organic growers. And it was a bit of a caution, I guess, then, because most of my local customers were conventional, and it scared them to think that their crops were not going to have pesticides or herbicides, not herbicides, but fungicides put on. And we had a little difficulty assuring them that that would be okay. And they did stick with us, and we were okay with the plants. But we then, I guess I'd have to say, we went after the organic market and advertised all around the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, and expanded the business to where we were shipping organic transplants to organic farmers all around the area. And at the same time, vegetable growers were pretty much getting out of vegetable growing on the shore. We were going through a transition from large vegetable growing operations. I think Aaron can talk about that a little bit. But we were losing those type of vegetable growers on the shore. Most of them were transforming to grain production. So anyway, we stuck with that market. We sold that business in 2000. We had two daughters after our son, and the goal was to put them through college, and the best way to do that, or maybe the only way, was to sell that business, which we did, and we got our kids through college. And I started a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Project, and my wife got a job teaching in the Wycomico County school system. And I did the CSA, and I did that for about 10 years. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's community-supported agriculture. It's where a farmer recruits families to receive a share of food every week. We put together boxes of food, of vegetables that we grew. They pay up front at the beginning of the season, or on a payment basis, whatever suits their capabilities, I guess. And so anyway, we did that for about 10 years, where we started out with 47 families, and we ended up with about 225 10 years later. And it became somewhat stressful. I think Aaron can talk about that too. So after about 10 years, I gave that up and started on my downward plunge into retirement and being broke. But anyway, I gave up the CSA and I was doing farmers markets, and gradually over the next 5-6 years, I dropped out of a couple of the markets, and as of last year, I gave up my last market in Easton, and now I'm growing a garden for my family, my kids that I got through college. Now I still have to feed them. They come and steal from me every week. It's not stealing. I'd rather have them eat what I grow than anything else. So anyway, that's pretty much my story, and I'll stick to it.
Aaron, you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
So I grew up, I guess, on my family farm. I don't know, I guess I'm 8th generation, I don't know, on the same land, but in Allen, in this county. I'm trying to think, I guess the farm was mainly vegetables back in my great-grandfather's day, my grandfather's day, and then I think they had a little bit of grain. My grandfather got into chickens, and when I was a kid, they still had chickens, but my dad got out of them. Purdue, they grew for Purdue, but I'm kind of glad he got out of them because I didn't want to be tied to chicken houses. So then my dad kind of went more just totally into grain. There was no vegetables once he was doing it full time. When I was a kid, they still had some green beans, like hand-picked, and my grandfather and great-grandfather did a lot of that. There was, they told me one time there was like 300 acres of hand-picked green beans at the same year. I know, I don't know if I believe that, but yeah. But that was when labor was cheap, and I think by the late 60s they started to phase out because they couldn't get affordable labor it just didn't make money to do that. So anyway, so I grew up helping my dad on the farm, big equipment, not big, but there was no manual labor at all. It's all chemical farming, and I guess we cultivated a little bit when I was a kid before there was the herbicides they have now. So I guess I worked for the University of Maryland doing ag research, wheat and barley breeding after college, and then I decided to start farming a little bit, and I tried sort of a CSA. I guess that was my first endeavor, I think 2007. So I was delivering to households. I think I had maybe 10 different households I delivered in the season a share of vegetables to each week, and they paid me every month. It was more of a subscription market, I guess, I don't know, and it was really stressful, hard to come up with a good mix of vegetables every week for these people, but I did it probably 2 years, and then I also sold to your CSA. At the same time, I bought a one-row green bean harvester that goes behind a tractor, and I don't know, it was kind of a fluke. I just found it and bought it, which sounds crazy, but anyway, it got me into green beans. So I was doing machine picked, and we had a grading table to grade the trash out, and so I would sell. Before I was transitioning to organic at that point. So yeah, it's a 3-year transition period. So those, I guess, did we do it 2 years maybe?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
Yeah, so that they were organic, just not certified, which was fine for your CSA. So I was able to sell some green beans that way. And when I became certified organic, I did mainly green beans, rotated with grain on I don't know how many acres I was doing at that point. I've kept adding land to it from my dad's farm over the years. So I was probably doing 10 acres of green beans and 20 acres of grain, rotated there for a couple years, and I was delivering to Whole Foods and Mom's Organic Market across the bay with a little cooler trailer I built that goes behind my truck. And that was stressful, dealing with produce managers and all that. They're kind of hard to figure out sometimes what they're going to come up with every week. So anyway, from there to now, I guess I'm doing 320 acres of grain and green beans now. So let's see, part of that acreage is still in transition. I think I still have about 100 in transition, and the rest of it's certified organic. And I'm doing some processing green beans with Hanover Foods now. They come down with their pickers, and they're certified organic ones. And of course, they're all under pivots. I've had to invest in pivot irrigation to kind of, it's just a high value crop, and you can't let it go dry. It has to have pretty much have water over it on our sandy land. And I do corn, soybeans, wheat, barley, a little bit of sorghum, grain sorghum. What else do I grow? Green beans. And I still do the fresh market green beans. I have a guy up in Queen Anne's County that has a bunch of labor that does my grading and cooling and packing. And he has trucks come to him, he gets brokers to come down and buy the organic fresh market green beans. So I'm still doing about 10 to 15 acres of fresh market green beans, and then tomorrow I'm supposed to plant 35 acres of processing green beans. So this is a crazy weekend, but anyway.
There you are.
Yeah. Well, I won't linger around, don't worry. So that's kind of a basis, I guess.
Okay. Well, both of you kind of touched on this a little bit, but could you talk a little more about how your methods have sort of changed or evolved over the years?
You want me to go with that?
Sure.
Well, organic vegetable production, I think Aaron's well aware of this and addressed it somewhat already, is hugely labor intense. Not less than, what I always heard is if you can get your labor costs down to about 40 to 45%, you'll be all right. But typically it can run as much as 60%, and I think that's probably been, and I think Aaron also talked about this earlier on, but that's also been a big issue. It's difficult to find people, although that's changing now, the people who care, want to learn, and can handle August. That's a biggie. But it always was a great difficulty finding people to help on a farm. I was fortunate, all three of my kids helped me through the years. And that was a huge part of my success, I guess. But now what I'm seeing is that young people now, and I'm not sure, I've asked them, and I can't say that I get a real straight answer, but young people now I think are realizing that their food supply is at risk, and there's a number of factors involved in that. It's corporatization is one factor for sure, but climate change is absolutely, has the potential to be devastating to our food supply if we don't get on top of that. I've been working with a seed breeder at a seed company in Maine that I've done business with for 30 years. And what he's been telling me through the last 3 years that we've been working together on developing new varieties is that the biggest challenge that faces seed breeders is to come up with varieties of crops that can withstand some of the temperature fluctuations that we're getting now. And I've always thought it's difficult for someone who has an air-conditioned house, an air-conditioned car, and an air-conditioned job to really grasp what's happening. Aaron and I work in the weather every day. I think a farmer is going to have a better take on what's going on with our weather than the average person who air conditions their life. What I see insects appearing sooner in the season, staying longer in the season, the fluctuations. Like this spring has been a roller coaster ride, and that's not uncommon for spring weather. But the frequency of the highs and the lows, the frequency is tighter. Meaning we could go from, say, 40-degree days to 70, 80-degree days over a 5 or 6 day period. Now it can be 2 days. And crops don't like that. I mean, they'd all rather be in Southern California, where it's, 70 degrees all the time, or close. And that's why 70% of our vegetables, or something like that, come from California. And that's why. It's a lot more moderate climate than, well, and we used to be more moderate, but that's definite. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know that I've been around a long enough.
Well, that's what I see as
I always see
one of the
fluctuations,
challenges.
but I don't know. I guess I haven't tracked it too long enough, maybe, or
Yeah.
kept. I don't know.
Do you see more severe weather here, in the
Yeah.
last 10 or 20 years, more severity with the weather?
I do, yes. The 7-inch drenchers that can wipe you out. 7-inch rain, that can wipe you out. That's I see that as that's one of the biggest threats. A heavy rain like that. I see that more often. I think it's more intense what we're experiencing now. Yeah. I don't know what else. Aaron?
Oh, methods, was that what I was?
Yeah, that's where we started.
Yeah. Well, I guess I started out just manual labor doing the mixed vegetables, and I realized I didn't want to hire anybody, so I didn't want to keep doing that. I couldn't do enough work. I mean, I just couldn't keep up with it on maybe a quarter acre. It was, just me. It was a lot of work, but because I had another job too. But so I tried to minimize labor. I mean, I had the machine pick green beans. I do have somebody ride the picker and just keep weeds and trash out of the beans and keep the box leveled, whatever. But I don't know. I've tried to just cultivate everything, and on a bigger scale, I can't really hand weed. I mean, I guess if I found a crew that could hand weed, I don't think I could afford to pay them, and nobody wants to do that on a big scale. I've heard of it, but when you need them, they're always picking watermelons or something else, or the big crews. So I've tried to keep it low labor and more mechanical, I guess. I don't know, I have 6-row equipment, so it's about 15 feet wide is the equipment. So eventually I either need to hire somebody else or go to 12-row equipment, or both, because I'm kind of, I don't know, don't have enough time to keep up with what I'm doing. So this year I did put into, well, last year I tried to, but I have a propane flamer. I borrowed it from the university. They had one that they don't use anymore. But it has, I've made it so it bands a little flame on each row, on 6 rows. So I try to, I don't want to cover everything. I just need to cover right before, with beans, any type of beans, you can flame them right before they come up. When they're cracking the ground, you can still flame them, and it kills the little weeds that are right next to them. It's the idea. It doesn't do a whole lot with grass, but broadleaf weeds it'll kill. And corn you can flame, when it's got even up to 6 leaves. I like to do it when it's got a couple leaves. So
Is it a box covers the crop?
No, I burn right on the row. Yeah. But with corn or sorghum, you can, well, sorghum doesn't do that well, but you can burn it and it'll come right back because the growth point's still way below the ground. But with beans, you have to. So ideally, you would plant and then you get a little rain on it, or you plant into wet ground that's already been rained on. It has a weed flush, which sounds crazy. And then you come back right before the soybeans or green beans come up, and you flame, ideally the day before they come up or whenever you can get in there, and burn those little weeds, and then the beans will pop up, and it's kind of like a stale seed bed.
Right.
So it's, because otherwise, like last year was a disaster for weeds, because it just rained, we had a foot of rain in June. You couldn't get in the field for 2 weeks to cultivate, so the weeds still come up.
Does that also help on the insect, the propagation of the insects? Does the flame also help reduce that, or is it just weed? I
think it's more, I don't know that it would kill insect eggs. It's only, you're going, 3.5 miles an hour, and it's, I don't know how many 1,000-degree torch it is, so it's mainly, it kills the cell walls, and I mean, if there was an insect there, it would kill it, but I don't know that if they're down in the soil, it's going to do much to them. It doesn't really change the temperature of the soil, maybe right on the top 1/4 inch, but So it's kind of a new, that's definitely a new method I'm trying, because I just can't seem to get weeds. Pigweed is a real bad one, and where you cultivate it, it loves it. So it's easy to hand weed on a small scale, but if you have, 100 acres of it, you're not gonna do anything with it. It's just the seeds are, there's so many millions of seeds per plant or whatever, but trying to think of any other methods. I don't know, that's the main thing I've done lately, is the flaming, so we'll see if it works this year, if I can get in the field.
Do you know, have you been able to calculate a difference between, well, I know you've never used herbicides or since you've been certified, but a cost differential between using herbicides and the flaming?
I would say the flamer's definitely cheaper, but if I had a really wide one, I guess it only uses about 3 gallons of propane an acre. I think that's what they say. So you're talking,
yeah, $10.
Maybe $10. I mean, there's probably some herbicides you could do for that, but yeah.
Well, that's an advantage then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm getting 2 or 3 times the price for my grain as far as conventional farmers. I don't really see any point. I mean, anyway, I like not using herbicides. I do have to spray some on the green beans, which is crazy. Hanover Foods doesn't want to see any bugs in their, in their green beans. So there is a kind of a spray program, even though you're not really supposed to have a spray program with organic, but they kind of have a, 2 or 3 sprays they want to do right from pin bean on to make sure you're not going to have caterpillars, or if you were in the fall more.
Right.
But, generally, my fresh market beans I don't spray unless you really have a problem going on. But so that's kind of a little. I'd rather not spray the processing beans, but they want to see it. So I don't know.
So you have to disclose that?
Oh yeah, I put down, I mean, the spray and what you're going to spray for. I mean, there has to be a reason to spray. You have to have some insects, but they seem to want to treat it before there's a problem, which, I don't know, the problem can happen overnight with bugs, so don't know. But
Well, that's sort of applying the conventional mindset to organic growing.
it's not an IPM, really. It's
Right.
not like yeah.
And what's an
they're
IPM?
Integrated pest management, I guess, where you're out there scouting, and you'd have to be really on top of it with organic sprays. That's the problem with them. They don't work as well as the other ones.
No.
You can't just go out there and wipe everything out in the field. You're not that you'd want to, because you're killing all the beneficials too, but it's it's definitely a different mindset working with a company that's used to conventional production and has kind of delved into the organic world recently. So
Farming sure's come a long ways, hasn't it?
I think so.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the
We used to, believe it or not, have horses to farm.
oh yeah.
Then we got a tractor with steel cleats. That was during the war. And then finally we got a tractor with rubber tires. And a 2-row.
Oh yeah.
And you're talking about, what, 4, 6 rows?
A 6-row. Well, 6 rows.
2-row.
Yeah, you can't even.
Little disc, 8-foot, 6-foot disc.
Yeah.
And know what your disc, you don't disc anymore, do you?
Oh yeah. I disc everything. I try not to plow. I disc everything twice. That's another thing I have is a high residue cultivator. It's this cultivator that can go through. Really, it could go through your yard and cultivate it up, and it wouldn't clog. It's kind of amazing. But I spent some money on. I found one used in Kansas, and it wasn't like a $300 used cultivator like you find around here. But I can go through some residues. I don't need to moldboard plow everything and kind of invert the soil. I try to disturb it as least as possible, but I do need some soil to be able to move with the cultivator. But it can have a little residue.
Right about the water. I have a fairly large vegetable garden, live around Caseyburg, Maryland. And believe it or not, in 24 hours, I got 8 inches of rain. It poured the hell out of my garden.
Gosh.
It just killed all the plants, particularly all the flowers we had planted.
It'll do it for sure. Yeah.
What type of fertilizer are you using? I mean, we have all these chicken farms out here.
Yeah,
Whether you can use chicken manure.
I can use it in organic. I'd rather not, but it's in corn and wheat. I use it. I don't use it on any vegetables or soybeans. The vegetables I'll use, well, I try to grow a crimson clover or Austrian pea cover crop mixed with barley usually, and this year it was a great cover crop, so I had a lot of nitrogen is available there from the cover crop. So, I mean, it depends on what you want your corn yield to be. You can have a really low yield if you just go with the cover crop. So it's, yeah, I try not to put on too much chicken manure, so it's kind of split the difference on the nitrogen. But there's a lot of micronutrients in it. I guess I could buy them somewhere and have a mix, but I don't know what if I wanted to know the price on what that would be with the organic versions of them. But
Yeah.
so I'm still using some chicken manure, and what else? I mean, I use like sulfate of potash. So it's any mined minerals I can use, or so you know, potassium that's mined, or lime, you know, pulverized lime. You can use that in organic, so I'll use that. I don't know. I'm becoming more of a high. I used to be more of a low input organic farmer. Not a lot of. What have I used lately that's expensive? I guess Chilean nitrate, we're allowed to use some of that on, well, they used to have a 20% rule on the total nitrogen. Now they've put that into sunset on the certified organic, which you can use, I guess, as much as you want, but your salts can get really built up from it. So I've found that that's something that comes from the Atacama Desert in Chile, I guess, Chilean nitrate. So it's, I use that on wheat and barley to try to, something that needs nitrogen right away in the spring. I have a much better looking wheat and barley crop than I've ever had. Using that, doing like 2 or 3 different splits of it, put 10 pounds on 10 pounds. You know, I can't afford to use too much of it, but so that's some of the fertilizers I use, most of them.
How about you, Jay?
For years, I've relied on compost. I've made my own. I've bought compost from a couple of different suppliers, and I've made my own pretty much from garden debris and yard waste, my own leaves, my own grass clippings, and then everything out of the garden. And I have a friend who's about a mile away, that I get horse manure from him. I've never used poultry manure, mostly because of the antibiotic issue, and of course now they say they don't use that anymore, but I'm not so sure of that. So I've relied heavily on compost. One thing you probably need to know is that I don't know how many times the acreage Aaron's farming that I'm farming. The most I ever farmed was 10 acres. Aaron's in the thousands, so
Well, hundreds.
we're a lot different as far as our practices.
Yeah, I would love to be able to use compost, but I couldn't afford to put, what,
No,
3 tons on every acre every year. I mean, yeah.
So I was able to make or, you know, occasionally I'd have to buy it, but I was able to make enough. And the way I was farming is you'd call it bio-intensive system, where as soon as something came out of it was a raised bed system. As soon as a crop was finished, I would bush hog that crop down, till it under, and within less than a week, I'd have something back in there. So I relied very heavily on compost. Compost can get you out of a lot. It can save you from a lot of problems. Well-made compost, and so we were not less than double cropping and interplanting, and some of the beds produced 4 or 5 crops a year. But that was the way we had to do things on the limited acreage. So I was heavily dependent on compost. Since I've stopped selling in markets, I'm working on trying to transition over to using cover crops, like what Aaron's doing too. I've put in a cover crop in most of my beds last fall that I then tilled under, and I've added no additional fertility to that, just to see if I can get away with it more than anything else. So that's a change I'm seeing.
Did you do
I think
a winter, like a
I put in peas, vetch, rye, clover, and daikons. And
It was a great winter to grow cover crops if you got them in
Oh, yeah.
in September,
Yeah, we got 'em.
early October. Yeah.
we got it in middle of September. And the cover crop did really well. 3 of those are legume crops, which add nitrogen to the soil. The rye is pretty much erosion control, and the daikon radishes. Are you familiar with daikon radishes? They penetrate deep into the soil and break up the soil, and then mine nutrients from deep in the soil profile, and bring that up to the surface and make it available to the cash crop that you'd be growing after that. That's something I want to experiment more with, get away from making compost. So.
What are some of the trends that you see for farming in general, whether it's large scale or small scale?
You want to start with it, or you want to?
Sure. Well, I guess the bigger farms are getting bigger. But there's some people with this certified organic grain. Purdue has a feed mill in Hurlock now that's certified organic, so they're pushing to have more local certified organic grain farmers, and a lot of them are, well, most of them are pretty hesitant to do it. They don't, but there's a few that are, every year you'll hear of a few more, so I don't know what the percentage growth is, but it's not going down, so it's definitely growing around here. The larger row crop organic is anyway. What do you see in the small organic world?
Well, that's what I'm seeing.
Acreage.
I think that smaller scale agriculture, because of the capitalization of a farm, small scale agriculture I think, will be the wave of the future. But we're always going to need Aaron Coopers. We're always going to need the large scale growers, what I would call industrial growers. We're going to need those growers to supply the urban populations. But I think small scale agriculture, I started to address this earlier. I see a really strong, renewed interest in farming as a career option for people who have no background in it at all. Typically, our new farmers come from our old farmers, their fathers, That's where most of our farmers come from, I think. And Aaron's a good example of that. But
maybe less and less, though. I don't know. It might be going more the other way.
Well, but you don't have the capitalization expenses.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of expenses that you don't.
Oh yeah, I could never. I don't know what kind of loan I'd have to take out to do what I'm doing now with sharing my dad's equipment. Essentially, it's that he's built up over the years, or his father, whatever. We still use. I don't think we use anything his dad's used, but
we do need that. But I see an emerging model of a small farm, maybe 7, 10, 14 acres, and intense production by dedicated people. I teach a class at SU on organic gardening, and I've been, it's been an off and on thing, but I've done it for about 7 or 8 years now. And it was like a fluky kind of thing for most of them early on when I first started that. But I see a really strong interest among young people in considering farming or market, what I call market gardening, as an option. And I try to convince them that it is an option. They ask me more questions about my lifestyle than how I make compost. What are your kids doing? There's a thrift shop across the street. Is that where you got all your clothes? They want. Is your mortgage paid off? That's what they want to know about. Can I do it?
Yeah.
So, and I try to convince them yes, without lying to them. But I do see a renewed interest in that. Yeah.
And there's markets for that too. The farmers markets are, they come and go, I guess, but they seem to be thriving.
Well, I'm not going to get this statistic accurate, but there's close to 8 times more farmers markets now in the U.S. than there was, say, 15 or so years ago. And it's something like that. I'm not too far off on that, which is good, and there's a downside to that. The market is sort of getting flooded. Which divides that pie amongst the farmers a little bit. And I think that's part of the reason that I quit marketing. last year is that 3 of the vendors saw what I was doing and thought, oh, this looks pretty good. And within a couple of years, they were all doing the same thing I was doing. So that kind of divided up the market. You know, it was corn, beans, tomatoes, peppers, cantaloupes, watermelons. You never saw a carrot. You never saw celery, you know, and never saw heirloom tomatoes. So when I started coming in with that stuff, they started to look at that and figure that looked pretty good. And anyway.
So, just this kind of ties in, what, if you know, kind of what is the percentage of organic farming to the traditional farming at now? I know it's increased, obviously, because we're seeing so much evidence of that. But what, do you have any idea?
It's under 5. It's somewhere around 3 to 4. It's less than 5%. Is it? Have you ever seen any figures?
Of farmers or acreage?
Well, yeah. There's product.
Product.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it would depend on how the question.
sure, yeah.
But as far as product, that's what I've
You can
read.
It's out in the stores, in the produce department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More and more, but it's not.
Oh yeah.
It's about 3%.
No, it's still small.
I think it's
you know.
still, didn't they say it grows 20% a year?
Yeah,
The
we've-
total organic market?
Yeah, the organic market that we've sustained 20% growth for 25 years.
I mean, there's even organic tobacco now, which is huge in North Carolina and Virginia, which seems crazy, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of people doing it. It's, I don't know.
There's a lot of confusion out there, though. You know, like an egg, you know, cage-free, pasture-raised. You
Yeah.
know, what is it?
Right, so
There's a lot of confusion. I think there's a really interesting. I've worked on this project a little bit. It's called the Lexicon of Sustainability. We've got a good website called that, the Lexicon of Sustainability, all one word. But that was an attempt to try to relieve that problem, that people just did not understand what the terminology meant. And so this group, a couple of farmers in California got together and started this project, the Lexicon of Sustainability, to try to help people understand the different systems, the different techniques, different terms that we use to describe the food, you know. So you would be able to make more informed decisions based on that.
Yeah, sustainable gets thrown around a lot. Some people don't know what it means. Well,
Yeah,
it means different things, I guess, but it's kind of a broad word.
Our terminology is affected, you know. I can remember when I was a kid, you'd see something that, well, young adult, you'd see it on a box of food, natural, you know. That's on Cocoa Puffs now, you know. And then there was, you know, then there was organic, and that got all spread around and meaningless. And then when I heard the term that we were starting to use the term sustainable, I said, well, they're not going to mess with that. But how can you mess with that one? You look at Cargill, you look at Dow, you look at Monsanto's websites. It's all over their websites, and there's absolutely nothing any of those companies are doing that you could consider sustainable beyond enriching their stockholders. That's about it. That's what's sustainable. There's nothing else they're doing that could be considered sustainable, but it's all over their websites. So I think I like to, Rodale uses the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania uses the terms regenerative and restorative. And I think, well, okay, let's move on to that. Let's see how long it takes them to mess those terms up, you know. And regenerative agriculture, saving the soil, building the soil. That's what we do. You know, we grow soil. That's what our goal is, right? I mean, we're trying to build soil to grow good crops. Because we're not the farmers. The microorganisms are the farmers. We're in this to help them do the job that they're in the soil to do. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah.
So you're the custodians, huh?
Excuse me?
You're the custodians.
Yeah, that's a good steward.
So, well, cover crops are a big thing to me. That's I don't want to see bare soil for very long. So it's.
I was driving in here Nanticoke Road, and close to town, there's a field that, gosh, I don't know how many acres it is. I can't judge big acreage. It's probably 30, 40 acres. And it's all laid out in black plastic waiting for, I don't know what, watermelons, something. But, and you know, the wind's blowing pretty hard, right straight out of the north today. Lovely. And, I mean, it could have almost been turn your headlights on to get through. The dust that was coming across Nanticoke Road, and that's topsoil. That topsoil's leaving that soil. The ground was sprayed with an herbicide, the plastic was laid. There's no sign of life in that field whatsoever.
It's a hydroponic system. There's black plastic and watermelon on that sand. I mean, it's pretty much, that's what it is. There's
all the nutrients come through the trickle tape. Yeah, it's not.
But they could sow a cover crop in the middles there if they were.
I would,
temporary.
if they were so inclined.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's I don't want to hog the time here, but I want to slide this in. This is my new sermon, I guess. I've been preaching this stuff for a long time. But we measure our successes primarily through dollars and cents, return on investment, cost-benefit analysis, okay? If we can make something for 10 cents and sell it for 15, we're good, okay? What we're not measuring, well, generally speaking, there are some that are doing it, what we're not measuring is the caloric exchange ratio. Does anybody know what I mean there? All right. Calories are a measurement of energy, okay? So we can measure the amount of calories that go into producing a crop, and then we can measure the number of calories that crop contains. All right, so to give you an extreme example, if I were a California farmer and a chef in New York City called me and said, "Can you get me a case of 24 heads of lettuce?" Sure can. So I grow the lettuce, and we're talking a lot larger, but I grow the lettuce, and I pack it up, chill it, refrigerate it, put it on an airplane, fly it to New York, through a number of little distributors, whatever, it gets to that chef in New York City and then to a plate. All right, so by the time that process has happened, we have invested 24 calories in 1 calorie of food. 24 calories of energy has gone in to produce 1 calorie of food. That is not sustainable. It's not going to hold up in the future. We get away with it with subsidized fuel subsidies, farm subsidies, a number of subsidies help us get away with that. But it's not going to last. It's not going to hold up. What we have to do is, not the 24 to 1 can be reversed, but we have to change that whole dynamic of the way we're growing food. What I've read is under 20% of those calories actually are on the farm. The rest of it is processing, packaging, transportation, delivery right to the plate. That's about 80% of our costs are there, off the farm. What that would tell you is that we need to localize our food system, very simply. And quit eating packaged food, processed food, minimize that, and minimize our transportation costs to bring that caloric exchange ratio to a better relationship. That's what we have to do. So we have to start measuring the way that happens. I have a friend in North Carolina who's done, he was a physicist and he decided he wanted to farm. So you can get an idea where his head's at. And he's done a lot of research on energy use on the farm and off the farm. And he says on average that we can do 9 to 1. We can do 9 calories of food for 1 calorie of input. And that relies on more hand labor than machinery. Aaron, what is your diesel fuel bill at the end of the year?
About $4,000 probably, yeah.
I,
And like my dad, he uses a lot of chemicals, but I mean, he's paying for, there's energy in that too, and it's not
Right.
great for the soil probably, but his diesel fuel bill would be lower on the same amount of acres because he's going over it less,
Right.
but I'm having to till more, but I'm trying not to, I don't deep plow anymore, which takes a lot more. A lot of organic grain farmers still moldboard plow. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why not buy a high residue cultivator and disc once or twice? And I don't know. I don't understand why anybody would want a moldboard plow. It's it takes it's wear and tear on the equipment and fuel and
that, not only that, there's another issue is that,
inverts the soil.
yeah, you know, the microorganisms that live in the basement, that's where they want to stay. The microorganisms that are up in the penthouses, that's where they want to stay. That's where they work. So when we flip soil over, we reverse that. Your approach to soil should be as gentle as possible, the least amount of disturbance, right? And that's what Aaron's doing with heavy equipment.
I've tried the no-till organic where they're growing a nice rye cover crop, you know, roll it down with some implement.
Yeah.
There's different ones, and then you plant no-till into it. But I tried that last year. I had a nice stand of rye. I was going to do it with soybeans. I planted soybeans into it. I even went early one morning and flamed while it was still dewy because it's dead rye, you know.
Yeah.
I went and found it. I have a picture of it, steam just rolling up. And but then I went to try to cultivate it with my high residue cultivator, which is supposed to be able to like just undercut the surface and
Yeah.
cut the little weeds off, but I could not get it adjusted right. Like it was either on top, riding on top, or it was too deep, and the rye was just balling up and
But you-
dragging behind me.
But you tried.
I tried. Then I ended
Most
up,
people wouldn't even bother to try.
yeah, but their researchers have done it on a research scale, but they have mechanics out there to adjust. You know, they'd have all day to spend on it. I'd spend an hour or two, and I had to
Right.
disc it up and start over. But you know, it was only a few acres so of ground. But anyway.
But the fact that you tried means you're thinking about how you can do things differently.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to get, and we've tried it on corn too, but there's so much insect population in that rolled down residue that, like southern corn rootworm, it just ends up cutting the corn seedlings off, like quite a big percentage of them. I tried that a couple years, and I would never do it with corn. Soybeans, I think, are the one you could get away with, but they don't have as many insect pests, and it's a little warmer, the soil, in June when you plant. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways out there where you can reduce fuel. I mean, nobody should be tilling that's using chemicals. That's ridiculous. But organic farmers still need to do it a little bit. But they could reduce it for sure. So
Any further
we're
questions?
kind of all over the place.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Do either of you have any closing thoughts or final thoughts that we can end with?
I don't know. I did want to get that caloric exchange ratio thing. I want to get that zinger in there. So
Yeah, it's a very good point. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jay and Aaron. You've shared a lot of knowledge with us, and we're glad that you're both out there producing things for people and doing the work that a lot of other folks just aren't doing, and that you're doing it the way you are.
I'm
Very educational, I appreciate the time you're giving us.
Absolutely, especially at such a busy time.
I'm glad Aaron's 41.
41, 42. I'm
Yeah.
not 41. I'm 41. Yeah.
I'm glad he's 41. And
I'm almost twice that age.
he's got, yeah. Well, Aaron and my son, same age,
Yeah.
Michael. Yeah. So I'm glad he's the age he is and has a good, strong future to carry on.
Yeah, not like I was when I was 31. That these 6 hours of sleep from work and back to it is not this week. This has been a busy week, so it's not always like that. Yeah, but in the winter, it's not too bad. You have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.